What's up, everybody? Italian Legend here. Today, I'm bringing you a topic that I think has a very, very big struggle or problem in the Smite community. And I wanted to talk about character selection in Joust for Smite. And if you don't know Joust, Joust is what's being played on in the background here. Um, Joust has a basically a single lane with a small jungle to the left and a really, really, really tiny jungle to the right, which is where the red buff is. And it's got a fire giant on the very far left, and a mana buff, mana buff in the right by the team spawning area right there. So that's Joust. But I wanted to bring up character selection in Joust because so many people pick improperly for Joust, and it's very it's quite irritating to play when you want a specific team set up, but you can't have it because someone picks either a poor character or they just pick the wrong role in general. Now, for a team composition, here's how I like to play my role. So imagine kind of like almost, front end, like in between front and back end, and then back end. So on the front end, I usually pick someone who is usually a warrior or an assassin. Then on the in between the front end and the back end role, I 9 times out of 10 pick a hunter, and then sometimes it can be like a guardian. And then on the back end, I pick a guardian or a mage. And the reason I do this team setup is because it forces the enemy team to split their defenses up, basically. So you have the enemy team has to focus on not only physical damage, but magical damage as well. So that's why I do that team composition. And that team composition, if you follow that team composition, you will not have as hard of a time to play Joust as if you don't follow that team composition. If you pay the reason I bring that up, I mean, if you look at this gameplay, the team I'm playing on, these are random people, by the way, but the team I'm playing on does not fit this role. I am playing the support role. What happened was, for this game, while I was in the lobby, I had selected an assassin, and the other person picked Arachne. So I told them I was gonna switch, and then I was looking for a different person to play as. I was debating between a mage and a support, and then the other person picked Ratatasker at the last second. I was like, oh my gosh. So I ended up playing Aphrodite, which I'm okay with because I'm really, really good with Aphrodite. So, but this is not a proper team composition, and this game went longer than it should have because we didn't follow the proper team composition. So that's why I bring that up. So this is a good example of that. The other thing is I wanted to talk about like proper characters to play as. So there's good characters to play as for good reasons. Situational characters, which basically fit into like either you need a good team composition or it depends on who you're playing against on the enemy team. And then there's bad characters to play as. And I'm going to give little examples on who these people are and why. So Aphrodite, as you can see, is on the good list. Reasons Aphrodite's good: she's really good in a team situation. She heals really, really well, and she has a high sustain. All of those reasons make her really good for a good character to pick in the support role or back end role, as I mentioned earlier. Also, I want to mention this. because Joust is basically a single lane, everyone is basically team fighting. So if your character is not good for team fighting, then your character is not going to be very good in a Joust match in general. So that's why Aphrodite fits really well, because she's really good at team fighting. Let's talk about another character on the back end, Freya. Freya's one of those characters that can be the in between the back and the front end, or she can be a front end, or back end. The reason I usually play her in the back end is because she does a lot of magical damage, and she's really good with slows and stuns. With her banish, she can basically stun someone, and her ultimate is really strong, and she does a ton of damage. And she's really, 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 really good in a team fight. Let's see. Let's find Raw. Raw is really good. Very easy to play. Raw has the heal ability as well, like Aphrodite. He's really good in a team fight, and he has a decent amount of sustain. Not as much as Aphrodite, but he is a decent amount, and he's really easy to play. Yeah, and then my last god that I would probably put into the back end list would be Ymir. Now Ymir's not a mage, but he is more of a guardian, and he does a decent amount of magical damage, and if played properly, can do really, really well in a team fight. Now granted, if you don't know how to play Ymir, he's not very good, but I definitely would put him in a good role, because if you place him properly in a good team and you play him properly, you will be doing wonders for your team. Now let's move on to kind of like the in-between the front and the back end roles. So I have Apollo. Apollo's really good because he has a stun. He's really good at team fighting. His ultimate is really strong, and overall does a lot of damage. Apollo is really strong, really balanced, and just overall is a really good a good character to pressure with on the battlefield for Joust. On top of Apollo, we have Neith. Now, Neith is just as strong as Apollo, in my opinion. She's really good because she has a lot of stun. She has a really strong ultimate, especially for Joust, which is really small. And she has a really good escape. And because of that, Neith is really, really strong. And she does a lot of damage, too. Probably not as much as someone like Apollo, but she does really, really well in a team fight. And overall, would definitely be a hunter I would always pick for that role. Let's see. Let's find... Hou Yi is another one that is always picked. Hou Yi, similar to both Neith and Apollo. Good escape, good team fight ability. Ultimate is pretty strong. Not the strongest between three, but still pretty strong, and overall does a lot of damage. Now let's move on to the front end role. Now the front end, I usually play a hunter or a assassin. And the reason I do that is because the front end does a lot of damage, a lot of the damage for your team. And so I usually play an assassin just because that's how I play. Assassins usually end up playing more of a sneaky role, and they usually use the jungle a little bit more. Warriors end up just facing their enemy and just using their abilities and fighting. So it just depends on who you're gonna play as. Also, warriors are a little bit more of a tanky role, so you end up tanking a lot of more of the damage while putting out your own damage, and on top of that, your team kind of helps out with the damage as well. Assassins, focus on one character, get a kill, run out, heal a little bit, come back in, fight, that kind of thing. So it just depends on who you like to play. So let's start out with the assassins. So for assassins, I like to play Loki, and Nemesis and Thor. Those are my top three. Reasons being, Loki plays a little bit more mind games, so I'll get into him a little bit after. But let's talk about Nemesis. Nemesis is probably a little bit more of a true assassin. She has good ability. She does a lot of damage, and she gets really strong as time goes on. Um, she has a little bit more health than Loki, but she doesn't need to use the jungle as much as Loki. She can do really well in an overall team fight. Um, and so she's not really, she's more of a really squishy warrior if you want to think of her that way, because she basically can face her enemies and fight that way. um, she's more of an auto attack base, but once you get her to basically uh, basically level 10 and up, she becomes really, really strong. Her early game isn't as strong as some of the others, but she's late game. She's really, really strong. Also, her ultimate bringing basically protections from 100 to 0 is awesome, and so that helps her out a whole bunch too. Not only that, she has a really good escape for being an assassin, so you can just dash out of a fight if you need to, which is pretty much what I end up using her dash for. So you get in, go in, get a kill, you're low on health, dash out. That's basically how that fight goes up and works. So she's really, really good for being an assassin. Now let's talk about Loki. So Loki plays a little bit more mind games than Nemesis, and the reason is because he's more ability based, and he's a lot squishier than Nemesis, and he doesn't really fit a whole lot into a team fight. But where he does really fit is, you know, your teammates are doing a lot of the fighting, and he jumps in, gets a kill, jumps out. That's basically what Loki's really good at, and he plays a lot of mind games with his invisibility, because he can just, you know, make people think that he's gonna attack them from the front, run into the jungle really quick, you know, use his invisibility again, pop in, use his ult, get a kill, do a lot of damage on the back end. He's really, really strong with the ganks in Joust. However, he's also really countered. He's also countered really well by using a sentry ward. So if you're playing against the Loki, use a sentry ward, and it'll help you out a little bit. And so that's what I always end up using, is just placing a sentry ward, getting, you know, and warding, or just an average ward works a little bit too, but a sentry ward's a little bit better for when he turns invisible and all that. But overall, Loki's really strong if you use him properly. My last assassin that I want to bring up is Thor. Thor is really good for, you know, he has a good stun, a good ultimate. He does a lot of damage, and he's got a teleport with his one. When he throws his hammer, you can teleport through walls and escape really easily. So Thor is really, really strong as well. He has a lot more health than some of the other assassins, so he almost is a warrior in himself. And you can actually build him to be more tanky than what he is now, which ends up making him more of a warrior. Now let's talk about warriors, and again, Thor would fit into that category, as well as an assassin. And I would also bring up Bellona. Bellona's probably the best warrior I've played. Probably played against every game. Every time I play a Bellona, she's super scary, and you end up having to focus her. And she's really strong. She has a lot of health. Her abilities are really, really good. Her ultimate's strong. Her 2, which is her hammer, is really strong. Her 3, which is her whip, is really good for escaping enemies on low health. And her 1 for her dash is really strong for engaging in a team fight. So overall, I love Bellona, and she's a really good warrior, and she fits into almost every team composition. The one thing I want to focus on for all of these characters that I brought up is that they all fit really, really well into this team composition that I brought up. Because if they don't fit into the team composition and don't fit really well in team fights, they're not going to be very strong. And all of these characters that I brought up fit that role really well. Now let's get into the situational stuff, which is this is where you see characters who they don't fit as well into that team composition or team fighting ability as I mentioned earlier. So we have characters like Nox, Artemis, Tyr, Odin, Chang'e, Poseidon, Nuwa, Amaterasu, and Fanfear. All of these gods have really good abilities, but where they lack is either player experience combined with the poor execution of a team composition. So Nox is a really good example of this. A lot of people who play Joust don't know how to play Nox, and they also play them in a wrong team composition. All the characters that have or all the people that have played Nox in a proper team composition end up playing her with the people who are going to do all the damage for Nox. Nox basically is just a CC machine and basically just ends up doing stuns and forcing people not to be able to use their abilities and that kind of thing. And even though she doesn't do a ton of damage, but she forces the enemy team to not be able to use their abilities. And while they're stunned or whatever, the teammates of Nox end up doing all the damage for her. That is where she excels. But a lot of people do not use her properly and try and get kills with Nox and that kind of thing. And that's not what Nox is built for. She's built for assists. And she's really squishy. And when she's used improperly, she gets absolutely destroyed. So that's why she fits in that situational. But she's a perfect example of all these situational characters that I brought up earlier, that they basically all do really well, but they have to be put in a good team composition. Otherwise, they don't play very well, and they get destroyed. So those are all characters that I put into that situational. Lastly, I want to talk about the bad. So these are all characters that just they're not very good at team fighting, and they don't fit into like 90% of all team compositions, and they don't fit into the three roles: front end, back end, front end, in between front end and back end. They don't fit into those roles 100%, and they have their own specialized role kind of built for them. And because of that, they're not very good for Joust. So these characters are characters like Sol, Janus, Anhur, Guan Yu, Zeus, Vulcan, Sylvanas, Geb, and Medusa. Now, the reason I want to bring up three characters in the bad list. So the first one I'll bring up is Medusa. I see a ton of people play Medusa, probably like one of the most played hunters in the bad list that I would put. And the reason I don't like having a Medusa on my team, and I think it's really awesome whenever I'm playing against a Medusa, is for a couple of reasons. Number one, her abilities just don't fit very well into a Joust match overall. Her ultimate's really predictable, and her overall abilities just don't help out in a team fight. She ends up becoming an auto attack based character, and that doesn't really help her out a whole lot. So that's why I don't like having a Medusa on my team or playing. I love playing against a Medusa, because all I have to do is look away for her ultimate, and it doesn't do anything to me. And then she wastes her ultimate. So basically, that's why I don't like playing with a Medusa. And if you're playing in the hunter role, there's so many other hunters that just fit that role so much better, and I don't recommend playing a Medusa for that reason. Next, I'll bring up is Sol. Sol is not played as much as she used to be, but Sol still gets played enough that it's like, why? Why did they pick that character? And I love playing Sol. I'm not very good with Sol, but I love playing Sol. And I can tell you right now, she doesn't fit the role of pretty much any of the roles. She doesn't fit in the front end. She doesn't fit in between the front and the back end. And she doesn't fit in the back end. Because she doesn't really fit. She doesn't really have that team chemistry with a lot of the other characters in the game. So her team fighting ability is lackluster compared to some of the other characters you could pick. And on top of that, she's pretty much a straight up damage mage. So she's really squishy and she's a straight up damage mage. Now, she does have a good assist. Her ultimate is absolutely garbage. So, as of now, her ultimate is garbage. And it does not allow for a strong game from Soul. Basically, she ends up having to use her 2 90% of the time and auto attacks 90% of the time, and it just doesn't help out your team at all. So that's why I don't end up playing Soul, and that's why whenever we play against a Soul or I play against a Soul, it just ends up being super easy to play against because she just doesn't have the team composition as some of the others. The last one that I want to bring up in this list, of the bad list that I want to bring up, is Yanis. A lot of people pick Yanis, and I don't understand why. He has a very decent lane clear. Not the best, but he has a decent lane clear. He does a lot of damage if played properly, but the problem is he gets thrown into a team fight, and he starts to lose his strength compared to if he was soloing, because he ends up having to focus multiple people at once, and it doesn't help him out very well. His ultimate is really strong for damage based, but if the enemy team basically dodges your ultimate, which is really easy to dodge, by the way, then it's like, why would I pick Yanis when I could pick other gods with better ultimates? Also, one of the things that makes Yanis really strong in a game mode like Conquest is the fact that he can just use his teleport to get out of a team fight. Now, that's helpful and all in Conquest, but it's not as helpful in a game mode like Joust for a couple of reasons. One, they can just keep you from going to that one side to get to basically teleport out through the wall. And number 2 is the jungle is so small that other characters have the ability to jump over walls or teleport through walls or whatever, or dash around the walls, and they can still get to you pretty quickly. So overall, Yanis just does not fit very well into a team composition. And I've never played against a very good Yanis, and I have never played very well as Yanis overall in a Joust match. So he's just one of those that he's so situational, and he ends up basically, it depends on the enemy team, and if the enemy team is a lot stronger than you end up losing. So yeah, overall I just don't recommend playing those characters. So yeah, I mean that's kind of my list, and you'll notice a very specific key theme with all the characters that are in the good list, in the situational list, and in the bad list. In the good list, all of them are really good at team fighting in general, and overall they always 9 times out of 10 fit really well into a team composition. And in terms of situational, again, it's situational on team composition and team fighting, and then in the bad list, they just don't fit into a team composition, or they don't fight very well in a team fight. So that's kind of why I put them in those lists. So yeah, overall, that's kind of my breakdown of playing Joust. I hope you guys like this video. Leave a like down below if you like the video. Subscribe for more content. I try and put out more gameplay as time goes on. And if you have any characters that you say that you disagree with, or that you want to have in a good list, situational list, or bad list, let me know in the comments down below. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys. This is Italian Legend, and I will see you guys in the next one.